What's up? I'm just leaving the office. We got to get back in time for a live stream. We're going to go to Reddit, to the subreddit Experience Devs, and this one is Manager Refuses to Give Feedback. So this person says, I'm in a big tech organization. I've been working in the same team since 4 years. I've been aiming for a senior level promotion since a few years. And in the mid-year cycle, I end up being disappointed with only one line: you did good, keep doing, it will happen, just not this time. So they go on to say they've actually been asking for feedback, but the manager refuses to give them anything. I don't know the details. Right? Refuses sounds pretty extreme. I ask if it's my impact, and he denies it, saying that he doesn't like folks who do stuff just for the sake of impact. Okay. The irony, okay, that's not really, I don't think that's relevant. Recently I asked him if my work not being visible enough is a problem. He said, it's not the visibility that matters, but it's the impact. Okay. And then he spoke on how there are people who do things just for being visible, and he doesn't like that. I agree with that. I don't like that, which is why I've kind of complained about this stuff in the past. He's a pretty supportive manager otherwise, and like the team and the work, switching teams or jobs would set back my progress at least by a few years, and it just feels like the promotion is 6 months away every time. So, I mean, is it actually resetting the progress? I don't know. Okay, that's an interesting topic for today. Like I said, I'm trying to get back for my live stream. I am in one of the worst moods that I've been in a long time, but I think that's going to be a bit of a trend, unfortunately. So we'll figure that out. Friendly reminder that if you want questions answered, leave them in the comments. And if you would rather write something longer or you'd like to be kept anonymous, then you can submit your question to DevLeader on social media. That's also my main YouTube channel that has edited down videos. It's not just me blabbing in a car. And I recommend you check that out if you want to follow programming tutorials and stuff like that. And it's also where I do my live streams every Monday night at 7 p.m., which is what I'm rushing back to go do, because last time I was late, and apparently when you try to stream, because I stream to LinkedIn as well, when I try to stream to LinkedIn and the event has already started, the streaming platform doesn't work. It doesn't tell you why, it just says it doesn't work. And in fact, it will start streaming to the last LinkedIn event you had, which is an absolute nightmare. So we're not going to screw that up again today, hopefully. Got an hour to get home. But okay, managers and feedback, how to navigate this. So first of all, I think that it's good that this person's asking for feedback, right? That's kind of my go-to recommendation for folks is like, and if you watch my other videos, you'll know I'll say, get on the same page as your manager, ask for getting aligned expectations, because it's really difficult to do anything in terms of making progress if you don't have that, right? If you don't know what your manager's expecting, they haven't been clear on that, genuinely, how can you expect to be making progress, right? You don't know what direction to head in, so to speak. So the fact that this person is doing that, I think, is good. I don't know, sometimes I'm a little skeptical when I read posts that sound like this, because, and it's not that I don't want to believe the person, but when they say their manager refuses to give them feedback, it seems weird, because I'm trying to imagine this, right? If I were to go to my manager and I'm like, hey, I want feedback on something, if they're just like, nope. Like, I don't think that's what's happening. I think when they're saying the manager's refusing to give them feedback, and again, I'm speculating, I don't know this. I'm assuming that the person is trying to ask for feedback in a particular way, but they're not getting meaningful feedback, or their manager's trying to answer it and it's not actionable, it's not concise, it's like kind of just word vomit, or it's avoidance. So when they're saying refuse, but I feel like, what they actually mean is that, like, they believe that they're clearly asking for feedback, and the result of that is that they're not getting something they feel that they understand. Like, to me, that feels a little bit more realistic. And again, I don't know, so I'm not saying this person's a liar, but the reason I'm trying to frame it this way is like, maybe that's feedback for this person. Is like, are you legitimately asking for feedback and your manager is legitimately saying no? No, I'm not giving you feedback. Or is it more likely that you are asking for feedback and maybe you're not actually doing it in a clear way? Like, are you trying to be specific with your ask for feedback? Because if you're just saying, how am I doing? And your manager's going, I think you're doing good. Like that, I could understand why you'd be frustrated from that. Like, and it's not helpful feedback, but I mean, they're answering your question. So I would say, one thing to consider here is like, how are you actually asking for feedback? What does that look like? And just trying to be more pointed with your ask for feedback, right? How can you be more specific? Because the more specific it is, the more actionable it is for you, and the more specific feedback you can get from your manager. Okay, one sec. I have to stop and think if I can get through this. This bus is going to be blocking more traffic than I am, so we're good. They shouldn't have went, so that's their fault. I don't have my 360 cam on, so I was a little bit too agitated to think about doing that. So first thing, for this person is just consider legitimately how you're asking for feedback, and maybe there's opportunities where you can be more concise in your asks. Now, I don't want to stop there and say that's the end of the story. Like, you just have to do better. Your manager is clearly doing a perfect job, because I think the other part to this that is confusing is that their manager is saying impact doesn't matter, but then they're saying impact does matter. It's the visibility part that they don't like. And I wanted to kind of talk about this part because it's kind of interesting, right? Like, impact does matter. Impact is one of the ways that we try to make sure that you're having like legitimate contributions, right? It's not like doing work at a company and just like staying busy doing random work is not the same as having high impact. And to be able to grow as an engineer, I feel like this is the case anywhere I've ever had conversations, is like, it's going to come down to like the type of impact you're having, like the outcome of your work. It's not how many lines of code you added or deleted. It's not how many bugs you fixed. It's not, these like random metrics. It's like, it comes down to the type of impact your work is having. Now, when you're more junior, it might be less about that, right? Because when you're more junior, a lot of the time it's just about building some momentum. So it's not like to go from a junior level to mid-level. The expectation is that you ship the most impactful thing in the world at your company, or else I'd be setting the bar pretty high. But the idea is that, like, hey, at that level, you're getting consistency, you're able to push code through, you're building up some level of autonomy and understanding, right? You're able to start being successful, right? I don't want to like try to use like a training wheels analogy, because I think that's kind of like not a very kind way to frame it. But truly, like, your team is there to support you as you're getting ramped up and getting used to what it's like to be operating as an engineer. So it is expected that you're asking for help and you need guidance and that kind of thing, right? So totally normal and expected. But as you're becoming more senior, it starts to shift a lot more towards impact. And that's why when you're sort of at senior and beyond, a lot of these things come down to the fact, like, truly, what kind of impact are you having? Say for me, like at principal level, it's like, is your impact organization wide? And this is where the visibility part will start to come into play. But I just wanted to touch on the impact part because, like I said, in my experience, I have never seen that impact didn't matter, or at least come up in the conversation. Okay. So I do think that that's confusing. Did I just stutter? I do think that is, okay. I do think that is confusing when you're getting sort of mixed messages around like impact isn't important, but then they start to hear it's the visibility part. For the sake of visibility is not important. The impact's what matters. Like I get that. That's very confusing because like what are you supposed to do with that? That's very contradictory if you're saying it doesn't matter, but it does. So just on the impact part before we talk about visibility, because the visibility part is where things like start to fall apart for me personally. I have some personal disagreements with the concept in terms of how I've seen it actioned, but I want to talk about the impact stuff a little bit more. So when it comes to impact, I know, and I realize if I were talking to the person that wrote this, I feel like my advice isn't going to be very helpful because they're going to be saying like, you know, my manager, their manager is confusing them. And based on what they wrote, like I get it. That is confusing. But going back to having conversations with your manager, right? I think having clarity on the work streams that you're doing and being able to understand what type of impact that does have, I think is important. It's not that every single thing you're doing all of the time is going to be like the most impactful thing in the world, right? It's like, it's not really realistic, but especially if you're working towards a senior sort of title, then, you know, being able to at any given point have at least a line of sight, or you're currently working on a project with some decent impact, I think is important. So if you're at a period of time where you're kind of like in this phase where you're picking up a couple of different, depending on how people operate with like their Jira boards and whatever else, or your sprints, if you're like, I feel like I'm just kind of taking the next random task, like you don't see any like cohesive pattern, I would say this is ideally you catch it before this, but a good opportunity to sit down and talk with your manager and say, hey, like, I want to make sure that I can be demonstrating impact. I want my work to be meaningful. And you could say something along the lines of like, I feel like I'm doing good work. I feel like I've been able to deliver on the things that are asked of me, but I don't feel like I have a cohesive set of work or like a project that I can, kind of take initiative on. And, you could clear it up with your manager. Like, I feel like that's an expectation of me for, progressing in my level and getting that clarity. Like, is that how you see it? Like, yes, no. I feel like odds are yes. It would feel very weird for me to have a manager just be like, no, I deny giving you feedback on this. And then trying to say, cool, like, can we talk about such opportunities? And maybe at that given moment, just based on how projects are being run, maybe there isn't something specific that you could jump into right now. But I would be hard pressed if a manager couldn't think of something that was like at least coming up. Like, hey, we got a few things going on right now, but like coming up, there's a couple of projects that might be something that you could start to look into. So like, I'll give you a heads up on some things we're thinking about. They're not like prioritized just yet, but this is what we're thinking. Because I like doing that if I have line of sight, because I can get a sense for like, hey, does someone have an interest in this? I want people on my team to be able to grow in their career. Like, why would I not try to set them up with something that's coming up? I would be transparent with them that like, if I don't have confidence that this is what's coming up in next sprint or something, I would try to be clear and say like, just so you know, like, no guarantee we're doing this just yet, but these are a couple of things we're thinking through. And if they're interested and they want to explore more, great. It's a very fast bike. So I think that's where I stand on that. Like, I think that you should be trying to look for impactful work. Don't freak out if you're like, oh no, I'm not doing anything that feels like it's very big and impactful at this moment. But having some line of sight into that, I think, is a great opportunity for have a conversation around it, right? So that's that part. I want to talk about visibility because this is something that I feel like is very nebulous. I struggle with this a lot, and I want it to be transparent about that, right? I think it's important that when I'm talking about things, I am clear with you if I feel like I'm speaking about this as an authority, or at least from my experience. And in this case, I understand from what I've been told about visibility, but it actually does not sit well with me, and I struggle with it a lot personally. And it makes it challenging for me as an engineering manager to try and talk to other people about visibility if it's something that I don't feel like I have, I don't know, like, I don't want to say it's because I don't have a solid understanding of it. I don't have a solid understanding of how other people that are the ones that measure the visibility, how they're thinking about it. Maybe I'll frame it that way. So, a lot of the time, visibility and impact go hand in hand, okay? And that's because when you're working on things that are very impactful, the amount of visibility associated with that is greater, right? There's generally a relationship between these things. If something is not very impactful, probably doesn't get a lot of visibility, and something that is very impactful probably does get a lot of visibility. Now, visibility on its own isn't like necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just a thing, right? Like, you could have a lot of visibility for something bad, right? Like, you have visibility across the organization because you deleted, you dropped the prod database and lost all the data. That's there is some visibility for you. Might not be great, but it's visibility. So when we talk about visibility, the idea is generally that if you're doing what is deemed to be impactful work, that people know about it. Now, where this starts to feel pretty like political from the perspective of like an organization is that it's kind of like, who has the visibility into your work? And I kind of feel like a lot of companies set this kind of thing up in a way that feels like, I don't know a good way to put it. It feels like it's not conducive to like good software engineering, and it's just like a game to play, and it really bothers me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not cut out for big tech in the end, right? Like, so I was at a startup for 8 years that grew into a mid-sized company of a couple hundred people. I've been in big tech for the last just under 5 years. And yeah, maybe genuinely, like, if that becomes the expectation or something that you have to kind of do in big tech, maybe that's not something I'll ever align with personally. But I understand like the rationale behind it, right? It's how do you quantify the impact? If there's dollar amounts attached to everything, sure. Like, saved X amount of dollars or generated X amount of dollars, great, okay. But there's a lot of stuff that's really difficult to just attach a dollar value to. So sometimes the amount of, the work that someone's done and the positive impact that can have on an organization, is observed across the organization, right? So it's impactful, and you could probably quantify it, but also there's a lot of visibility into it because different parts of the organization, you'll have, different leaders across the org that are like, yes, I recognize that work as goodness, even for my part of the org. And I know that so-and-so is working on it. The problem I find is that people are people, and we love to game things, right? So if I tell you, just let me, it's going to be like a contrived example, and I'm making it up off the top of my head, so I don't even know if it's going to work. But if I told you the way to get promoted is that you need to do high impact work with a lot of visibility, the problem is that people will try to game these things, and I don't mean like in a malicious way. So I'm not sitting here being like, oh, all these engineers are, being malicious and whatever. It's just like, no, like you've given them things to optimize for. That's what they're going to do. If their goal is to be able to grow in their career, they will optimize for these things. So generally, I find it starts off with, hey, like you need to do something that has impact. Okay, so how do we optimize for that? Like, hey, manager, I would love to be able to help lead a big project. I want to make sure that I'm having that impact. And I don't feel like that's a bad thing, right? I feel like that can be a good thing. Now, you can have some people that take the perspective that, like, if other people are helping me or other people make it look like their, I don't know, their contributions are outshining me on this project, then all of a sudden, like, it's not my impact. But I think this is a bit of a misconception, because I think some people perceive impact as like a, I don't know if the word or the phrase I want is like zero sum. Like, basically, you have a situation where like 1 + 1 can equal 3, right? So if you're leading something and you're doing all this good work, and someone else is participating in the project and they're also getting like, they're delivering good work as part of your project, it's not like all of a sudden your good work in leading this is overshadowed and like, oh, well, you don't actually matter. No, like, it just means that both of you are going to be recognized for having impact. Now, people might have different experiences with that and disagree, and maybe that's why they have this perspective. So be it. I can't tell you your lived experience is wrong. But from what I've observed, and my philosophy on this kind of thing is like, it's not that someone else's success takes away from yours and vice versa. So unfortunately, what can happen though is people end up going, well, like, no, you're stealing my thunder. Like, I need to be the one. It needs to be me. And this is where things start to fall apart, because I feel like that is not conducive to good software engineering. That's called PvP, right? That's player versus player. That's you only caring about yourself because you've been told to optimize for that. Or that's your interpretation, is like, if I want to get promoted, it needs to be me. It needs to be my impact. And I feel like this is even more the case with visibility. Okay, so you can find something that has enough impact, and then you spend all of your extra time. I don't even know what extra time means in this case. Who has extra time? You spend a great deal of effort basically just trying to drive as much visibility to the thing that you're working on. And you over-index on this. You basically, like, all of your effort, as long as you're getting, some progress on the project done, you spend so much time just trying to communicate to everyone, look at this thing I'm doing. And it's almost like, that's where I would agree if this person's saying what their manager said is real, where they're like, I don't want people to just pick things for visibility. I'm like, I wouldn't either. That feels like a weird thing to that you should try to optimize for. So this is why I said I think that there's a correlation. If you're working on truly impactful work that has a lot of impact, almost by definition, it's going to have more visibility, right? Because the impact is great. It's not guaranteed necessarily, but like, generally speaking, the more impact, the greater the visibility. Okay, so I just think that we end up optimizing things that are put in front of us. It's like, I don't know, like human nature, right? We want to, someone says, here's the criteria, you go, no sweat. Like, I'm a software engineer. I can do the analysis, I know how to optimize, and I will do it. I just don't really agree personally, with like that being the setup for optimization. Now, the other thing that I find I really don't like about the visibility thing is like, and maybe this is my own personal sort of experience with it. If I'm having a conversation with my manager about the work I'm doing, and my manager has said to me, like, this is a work stream for you that's going to have organization wide visibility. It's a good project for you to be on. Personally, I would like to be, and maybe this is me being naive, I would like to be able to trust my manager and believe in them that if they say that if I deliver on this, that this has significant visibility, that visibility sort of will happen. I don't, unless they explicitly tell me that this type of thing needs to be communicated more, I don't anticipate that I'm going to go out of my way on like a rally and like go shout out to all of the leaders in the organization to say, look at me, look at the project I'm doing. And I don't feel I should have to do that, because if my manager has said that the project has significant impact, then that should come with the visibility. But again, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe truly you do need to go parade around and tell everyone what you're doing. I don't know. But I've definitely found myself in situations over the last 5 years where it's like, hey, do this. This has the right amount of visibility. This is going to be great. You know, put your energy into this. And I go, okay. And like, I can rationalize that like the impact that it's going to have is great. And then I do it. And then the feedback is, oh, not enough visibility. And I go, oh, like, really? Because like, if I delivered on the thing that you said that was supposed to have the visibility, were you expecting me to go advertise it more and then didn't tell me that? Or did you have it wrong and it actually wasn't that impactful? Right? I get it. That's going to be on me to some degree to be able to make sure that I can follow up with that kind of stuff and be proactive. So part of me gets that. But the other part of me starts to be like, hey, look, like if that keeps happening, then I don't really know if I can trust what I'm hearing in terms of visibility and impact. Right? Like I wouldn't keep, I'm not going to keep repeating the same thing. So it's my kind of take on, I don't really like visibility because it feels a little bit nebulous, I find, right? I could be going around to different leaders in the organization and schmoozing and being like, hey, you know, this thing I'm working on that's really important, I could be doing that. I don't necessarily think that that's a good use of my time, to be honest. It just feels like that's not super helpful. You can make arguments that like being able to communicate stuff is is helpful, and I don't disagree with that. Like, for example, I worked on things and we set out organization-wide newsletters for updates and stuff. Like, I think that's a helpful thing, right? Here's something that's coming to the organization. Here's how it's going to impact you and the goodness that comes with that. I think that's great. But I don't feel like I have to kind of schmooze to the other individuals to bring that sort of visibility. And to be fair, no one's telling me to do that. Because if they did, I would get a really bad feeling like I'm not doing that. Not worth it. So I think for this person, right, when it comes to impact, when it comes to visibility, I would say, and feedback, right? They're not getting feedback from their manager. The first thing I said at the beginning was like, if they're doing a reflection on how they're asking for feedback, maybe there's an opportunity here to be more specific with the feedback. Not, hey, how am I doing? But more of a, hey, I did this, we just did this project update. Here's the status. Like, did you have any feedback for me on how I could present that status better to these stakeholders? Or I just put this design review together and you were, in the meeting, or we were reviewing the design doc I did. Do you have any specific feedback for me on what I could do to make my document more clear? Right? Ask for specific feedback, because unfortunately, I mean, like, I can understand where, especially if put on the spot, if you're not giving someone some time to think about this, like, give me some feedback on how I'm doing. It's like, where do you start? And I'll be transparent. I've had engineers on my team say, hey, we're in a one-on-one. They're like, hey, we have some extra time. I was just wondering if you could give me some feedback on how I'm doing. Right? And a couple things, right? So number one, mentally, I have not prepared anything specific, and that doesn't feel very good. Okay, I'm gonna go. It doesn't feel good for me to be like, I can't give you something more specific in the moment. Number two, for me, based on my personality and how I operate, I like some time to think about things ahead of time. And so the side effect of that, when this has happened to me, is I will generally say to people, hey, no problem. I said, I'd love to give you feedback. And then I'll tell them, I can give you off the top of my head, I can give you some high level feedback on things. And if you want, because clearly if you're looking for more feedback, if it's not happening, regularly enough, or you're kind of going through a particular phase where you would just like some additional feedback because of a project you're working on or something, whatever it is, no problem. Let me sync up with you further. Sorry, I should have went. I'm going to beat myself up now. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you some more specific feedback. We can meet later in the week or whatever, like tomorrow, whatever it is, so that I can have some time to process it. So generally I'll do that and then give them some high level feedback. And I find that's a good compromise, where I'm not just like, you're doing good, pat on the back, and then they're like, great, my manager sucks. But I can say something in the moment, even if it's not going to be super actionable or something like that. But I can use that as a signal to say, hey, we should talk about this more, because clearly you are looking for more feedback. So good balance, I find that way. So I would recommend to this individual, that's something to do. In terms of impact, I do think that it's part of going for senior, being able to demonstrate that, and having conversations with your manager about trying to align some projects. It doesn't mean, sometimes it's not going to be, yes, you have to go lead this project, but you might be able to participate in a project that has big impact and you can play a significant role in that. And that could be awesome. Right? And then I would say, for me, at principal level, the expectation is that I do have projects I am leading. It's not, for me, it's not going to be significant just to participate in projects. And in fact, the feedback that I've received most recently is that it's not even executing on projects. I need to be able to be in a position where, that's funny, my wife's dog is howling. I could see her looking up and oohing, which is really funny. She's super cute. It's not just sufficient to execute and deliver. It's and even with disability, the most recent feedback was it needs to be innovative. So it needs to be high impact, very visible, but also something that is new and innovative that hasn't been done before. So, for example, something like the project that I'm leading right now that is very impactful and has a lot of visibility does not actually meet the bar for innovation, which is frustrating because that's a lot of time and effort. So this is why this kind of thing can get really muddy. And I think that you need to be able to have conversations with your manager about building that aligned expectation, because otherwise you're going to have friction and resentment because you're feeling like you're hearing different things. And I think it's totally understandable why when people get feedback that's very generic, or they're not getting feedback, um, or they have been given feedback and then they follow it and then they get a different result, it doesn't work, right? If you're always getting feedback like, yes, you're doing a good job, keep doing what you're doing, I think for a lot of people, that means what it sounds like, which is, okay, I'll keep doing it. And probably pretty soon, within the year, maybe it's the next promotion cycle, then I should be promoted. But that's like such a missed opportunity for aligned expectations, unfortunately. So I do think it's important to try and drive clarity around that. Um, ultimately, if you're trying to have that conversation with your manager and it's not happening, it might be something that like you're not in a spot where you're going to grow effectively, which is like kind of hard to acknowledge and say, right? I'm trying to think, if I had people on my team that were coming to me for feedback and I couldn't give them ways or things to focus on where I'm like, hey, like, to go from this level to the next level, this is what we need to be aligned on. I'm not saying like, here's a specific project, go do this and then you're done. But like, if you're not working in this direction, you're not going to be progressing. If I can't tell people that, then I don't feel like I'm helping them grow at all. And if they wanted to go somewhere else where they're getting that support, I shouldn't be surprised by that. So anyway, those are my thoughts. A little bit ranty tonight. 27 minutes before the live stream. So if you've watched this far, this will probably go up on Wednesday morning if I do everything properly. So this is my reminder to you, if you like these types of conversations, but you want to be part of it, on Monday nights, so 7 p.m. Pacific, I do a live stream on my main channel called Dev Leader. I don't do it in the car. I do it in my office. And you can, I encourage people, ask questions in the chat. Whatever I'm presenting on, which is usually my weekly newsletter issue, the same topic, I will happily pause that and just talk about whatever is being asked in the chat. I would prefer to do that. So if you enjoy these and you want a chance to actually chat and have me answer questions live, please come join me on the Monday night live stream. They are all recorded as well. So if you're like, I don't know what's involved in that, I want to see, go over to Dev Leader. You can probably see like I think there's a tab for live videos that are recorded, and you can see. Watch it on 2x speed so you don't have to listen to me blab for as long. But you can see what's involved and the opportunity there. So I hope to see you. I know a bunch of you from Commute have joined on the Dev Leader live streams. It's really cool to see you there. And yeah, I will hopefully see you next week. Take care.